Good evening. Welcome to Candidate Speaks. If you didn't know before, let me tell you, we're doing a set of interviews with the new candidates for the Democratic Labour Party. You are going to get familiar with them. You're going to hear what they intend to do if they become the representatives for the various constituencies. And of course, it's part of the 63rd anniversary week of activities of the Democratic Labour Party. And tonight we're meeting with two new candidates. I'll introduce you to the first one, who's sitting to my immediate right, and his name is George Connolly. Good evening, George.
Good evening.
And George, you are the candidate for St. James Central. Before we get into all your ideas and your vision for the constituency of St. James Central, I want you to tell the audience, the listening audience, the viewing audience, what is your background? Just give us a brief idea of who you are.
Okay, well, my entire background is based on private sector trade. I've been a GM, I've been a regional GM, I've worked in marketing, sales, finance and technology, and I've worked all through the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. So basically, finance background, general management background, technology background, working all through the Caribbean. So and having fun doing it.
So your background, your educational training, your professional background combined makes you a very strong candidate in terms of representation and the kind of representation you're likely to offer St. James Central? Would you say it?
I think everything I've done makes me a good business person. And we can equate everything that we do inside or outside of commercial life to a business profile. Mm-hmm. So I like getting things done. I like getting them done efficiently. I like getting them on time. And I like getting them done to budget. Mm-hmm. So, yes.
Okay, so what drove you, what motivated you to enter the political race and to vie for the position, for the representation, or to represent the people of St. James Central? What motivated you?
Well, first thing, I live in St. James Central.
Okay.
So, you know, the constituents there are my neighbors, my friends, I see them every day. And the other thing is that I spent a lot of time in the Caribbean as I was working. And every time I came back into Barbados, I would complain bitterly. I was one of those armchair critics who would sit down and complain about this isn't going right, maybe we should change that. That isn't going right, maybe we should change this. And I have an 11-year-old son.
Okay.
And he and I lived together in Jamaica. My wife stayed here during the time. And one of the things that I would say to him constantly during his years growing up, when he had a problem, sort it out, stop complaining. And I was gutted one day as I drove him to school complaining about something. And he said to me, Daddy, stop complaining, sort it out. So I'm here today, stop complaining, and hoping to sort it out. And the Democratic Labour Party has given me the opportunity to be a part of that process.
Okay. So as a resident of St. James Central, what are some of the issues that you think need resolving? Just briefly tell us some of the things that you would want to fix and the ideas that you have if you should become the representative.
Well, let me say first and foremost that St. James Central is perhaps the most beautiful place to live on the island.
Okay.
It spans the entire...
We can debate that, though, George, but go ahead.
And a robust debate at that. But it spans the entire socio-economic, ethnic and cultural spectrum that we have here on the island. And because it sits between Warrens and Orange Hill, right, the entire 90% of that constituency sits to the west of the ABC highway, that section between Warrens and Orange Hill. As beautiful as it is, it's a flood-prone site.
Okay.
Everything comes downhill and most of the homes are either on that ridge or on the flat below. So this segues into one of the things that anyone living in that area has to endure. And we need to look at the housing stock along that entire ridge. We need to look at the infrastructure along that entire ridge. We need to look at the pathways that we have, both for persons to traverse into their homes and also for wells to divert water from homes, etc. So when I speak to St. James Central, that's the thing that jumps out to me immediately. There are some other things. Recreational areas for people. Now, there's no way to hike, bike, or have a dog trail in St. James Central. They've got about 3 parks, but they all need to be upgraded. We don't have lit areas for people to go at night. You've got Folkestone Park, but you can only play tennis and basketball there at night. And Redmond's Village is a different story in terms of what we can do there. So one of the plans is to upgrade all the sporting facilities and add a new one somewhere around Holders Hill and maybe another one over in the Arch Hall area.
So you're thinking about community projects that can uplift the spirit of the community, provide activities for the young people as well as the elderly. That sounds like a good vision, George, but in terms of the resources, what type of resources do you think you would need to execute those brilliant ideas that you have?
Well, the government has no money.
Right.
So we never look to the government for financing. But what we do have is that we have a large and vibrant expat community, and most of them are, for lack of a better word, not poor.
They're doing well.
And one of the things that we started to do is to have engagement with this group. And also, we're looking at several different events to raise funds as we go along. There are 2 critical things. And when we look at this, we always think of the risk involved. So here's the risk. If you live in a community and there are people who don't work in that community, those people are at risk. Why? Because they need to eat, they need to survive, and they will do what they need to do to survive. So as a community, we need to look after those persons. When we have homes that aren't suitable for the inhabitants, that becomes a risk to the inhabitants and a risk to the persons who live surrounding that house. Because should something happen, God forbid, and the hurricane season is just around the corner, that house becomes a missile. So the way for us to get engagement is to share with the community, these are the risks that we as a community need to manage. And then we as a community need to come together and look for ways to solve it. And that's the way we're going about it. So the resources comes from the community and from social engagement and not from government first.
I like the fact that you're going down the road of community participation, getting the residents involved in resolving some of the problems that they are faced with. And I like the idea that you're sticking also to integrate among the classes, because you just don't want one set of the community feeling as though they're privileged in comparison to the others. You want as much as possible to have a balance, to have what I would call equal access, where the persons at the bottom would feel confident about themselves as well as live in more comfortable circumstances. So I like what you're saying in terms of your vision for community development and bridging the social strata in terms of the class divides in your constituency. Now, in terms of your vision for the next 5 years, where would you like to see Barbados go? Have you thought ahead? Should you become the representative? Should you become a cabinet minister? Have you given those things any thought in terms of a vision, how you want to see Barbados progress and develop?
All right, this is not going to be a short answer.
I've got the time.
All right, so one of the critical things, and people who would have heard me speak would hear me constantly evangelize that productivity in this country is quite low.
Okay.
the figures bear out that the productivity levels that we enjoy today are the same that they were in 1991. Now that's a problem. One of the things that we need to do as a country very quickly is to embrace technology as a social science to be a multiplier for the workforce and also to lift productivity and transparency. And I want to be a part of that whole cycle,
that change,
the revolution, to make that happen. And I have made those overtures to the leadership of the party. My peers have all embraced it. And I'm very happy to say that that is what we're going to be looking to do going forward. So we're going to talk about the changes for Barbados. Now, there is a book that the World Bank is going to publish very soon. It's called Open and Nimble.
Open and nimble.
Open and nimble. How to get small, open economies to grow in a sustainable way.
Right.
And it's written by two authors, one called Liederman and the other one called Lesniak.
Okay.
And the general thesis on this book is that small, open economies are always at risk from external shocks, from internal movements, the machinations that we have internally. But two takeaways that I took from it is that one, small economies specialize in particular things. We specialize in hospitality, the tourism sector.
Yeah.
And if you look at what we offer in that industry here, and you compare it to the rest of CARICOM, you can see a distinct difference in what we offer. And we then take our talent and export it.
Right.
The second thing is rum, molasses, sugar, that whole ecosystem. All three are connected. We are very good in that space as well, but we are allowing it to die. When there is so much opportunity there for us to use it, even if as just a prototype, so we can show the rest of the world the IP. So we need to harness that, we need to capture it, and we need to sell it globally. So, talking about those 2 points, first thing, specialization. Number two, now, when we speak to what's called diseconomies of scale,
Right.
small economies like us, people think the more you do, the cheaper it gets. Not the case. For small economies, usually the more you do, the more expensive it gets per unit. And there are two things. We continue to look inward in terms of a marketplace. The commercial class that we have here is very conservative. And we need to get them to start looking at CARICOM